realistically, how many years away are we from space tourism really becoming a reality?
Oh, it's coming, right? And it's coming soon. But it depends what you're talking about. If we're talking about space tourism in low Earth orbit, we're close, right? We've already got, in particular in the US, some outfits there that are offering flights into low Earth orbit, and that's relatively achievable. I mean, the big push is when we're talking about that deep space exploration, and the tourism for that, I think, is many years off. Not least, and that's not just for tourists, that's for the astronauts. We need to do more to understanding the effects of the space environment on the human body, make sure we survive, basically.
When you say many years in terms of the outer orbit, is that like half a decade, or even before that?
So we're going back to the moon, but that will be astronauts, that won't be tourists, right? So if you think about tourists, you can probably add another decade on top of that, really. And then Mars is a long shot again.
And so what is the role of government in this emerging space tourism industry?
Well, I think the government has a role to play and the private sector has a role to play more broadly. So we in the UK are really proud that we have earned the reputation to be the most commercially facing space sector in the world. So governments have a role to invest, for instance, in some of the big infrastructure. But otherwise, there's a role for the commercial sector too. So in the UK, we have a very mature telecommunications sector, for instance, right? We're going to need that communications activity. But governments don't necessarily need to build that from scratch. The capability is already there. So the private sector can provide that for some of these huge missions that we're going to do to the moon and then beyond to Mars.
What rules should the regulators work on for this coming space tourism industry?
Yeah, fascinating, right? Fascinating. So space agencies and countries, we all look to the UN as the kind of cornerstone of our legal frameworks. But developing those regulations takes quite some time. So, my view is really that we all need to be involved in developing those regulatory frameworks. It's too easy to fall into the trap of, old versus new, big versus small, public versus private. Actually, all of the actors will need to come together. And we're already seeing some really, really positive initiatives being taken. Not least through the World Economic Forum. We have the space sustainability ratings being developed by the industry to ensure that everyone can have safe operations in space.
And so as a space expert, what do you think should be the rules of the road?
So first principle is do no harm. Right? We want to make sure that the space is an environment that everyone can benefit from. So we need to make sure that no single country, no single agency is going to do something which will prevent other countries from exploring, other agencies or industries from exploring. The second thing is we need to be much more open about our operations. So typically, particularly when we think about the orbiting environment, the data around operations and positions of satellites or debris has been pretty locked down. And whilst that might have been the right thing to do about 20 years ago, now with a proliferation of actors and the ambition that we have for our space programs, we need to get much better at opening up that data and making sure that we can all prevent collisions in space effectively.